Right. Okay. So we are talking about Shmuel Aleph. We left it last week having spoken about the strange relationships between Shaul, David, and Shaul's daughters. And I left you with some homework. Can any of you even remember what the homework was, let alone done it? Yes, Anita, you're a head girl. Yeah, I bet you did your homework. Come on, Anita, unmute and tell me what the homework was.
You said, can you think of anything similar between the relation somewhere else, similar to the one of Shaul and David HaMelech and Michal?
Okay, very good. You remembered the homework. Did you do it?
Well, the only thing I could think of, it's probably wrong, but it reminded me a bit of Yaakov being given Leah, who he never loved.
Excellent.
Is that right? Oh.
Yes. Well done, Anita. Well done, Anita.
Gold star.
Yeah, head girl. You can have a. You can have a. We used to get my kids never got them, but in my kids' school, you used to get a Kessa shame tie for that.
She's not only a pretty face, Johnny.
No, she's not only a pretty face. That's it. Right. So let's go straight to Shmuel Aleph, where we left off. The end of chapter 18. I'll share my screen with you. I will if it lets me. There it is. Okay, so right, you can now see my screen, and that's the end of chapter 18. And Anita is absolutely right. The connection that I wanted to point out to you was the connection between, or the parallel, not the connection really so much as the parallel between our story here and the story of Yaakov, Lavan, Rachel, and Leah. So the protagonists in our story are David, his father-in-law Shaul, and his wife Michal, and his should-have-been wife Merav. And now, if I put it that way, you can see that the parallel is very clear, isn't it? Because the protagonists in the Yaakov story are Yaakov, his father-in-law Lavan, his wife Leah, and his should-have-been wife, and eventually was his wife, Rachel. Okay, so you can see the parallels straight away. And we're going to have a look at some these parallels in a bit more detail now, and see where these parallels are, where the points of sort of correspondence are, and then we're going to sort of have a look and see what it all means, and why the author of Shmuel Aleph is taking us both thematically and, as you will see, linguistically to the Yaakov Lavan story. So we'll start with you, Anita. Tell me what made you think that these two stories were parallel. Give me one point where you see a correspondence between the two stories. You're muted at the moment.
I know. Okay. Well, first of all, it was Shaul who proposed Merav to be his wife, and Lavan gave him Leah. But it's the fact that he really, and it was all the time it said that Michal loved David, but you never heard, it was never written that David loved her, and he never loved Leah. So it's
okay. All right,
unrequited love.
Let's take that point first. Yes, okay. It's not the first point in the chronologically, but it's definitely a point. We pointed this out last week, didn't we? That Michal loves David. Not only does David not seem to reciprocate that love, we know here that David loves Michal. What we see in 3 separate places, and I'm going to show it to you now, is that what was David's interest in marrying Merav or Michal? Was it Merav or Michal?
What do you mean his interest?
Why did he want to marry them? Okay, let me ask it.
Maybe he didn't. He didn't.
Well, he didn't.
Maybe he didn't. Okay, let me ask the question about Yaakov. Why did Yaakov want to marry Rachel?
Because he loved her.
Because he loved her. Why did David want to marry Michal?
He didn't think he was worthy, did he?
Well, let's have a look at verse 23 here. Okay. Philip, unmute yourself and read for us verse 23.
And Saul's servants spoke these words in David's ears. And David said, does becoming the king's son-in-law seem to you to be a light thing? For I am poor and lightly esteemed.
Okay, stop there. So what is David's interest here? David's interest is not in Merav at this point. It's in becoming the king's son-in-law. Says so. David is saying the king's son-in-law, to be the king's son-in-law is a big deal. Doesn't say marrying Merav is a big deal. So he's interested in becoming the king's son-in-law. And now, if you're not convinced by that, Philip, read 26 for us, please.
And his servants told David these words, and the thing pleased David to become the king's son-in-law, and the days had not expired.
Okay, so there it says very clearly that the thing pleased David to become the king's son-in-law. Nothing to do with Merav, nothing to do with Michal. Okay, verse 27, please, Philip.
And David arose, and he and his men went, and he slew 200 men of the Philistines, and bought their foreskins, and they delivered them in full to the king, in order to become the king's son-in-law. And the king gave him Michal his daughter as a wife.
Right, stop there. Now, it's very clear, isn't it, that he went out and got killed the Philistines and brought their foreskins in order to become the king's son-in-law, not in order to marry Michal. That's very clear. Now, you're right, Anita, that Yaakov did not love Leah. Not only does he not love her, we're actually told that she was Senu'ah, which means hated. Yeah. So we won't go as far as to say that David hated Michal or Merav, but you can see from his language here that he does not love her. And you will see in the next chapter that he does not treat her appropriately. And you'll see in the coming chapters, when we get into the juicy bits, that he is not a faithful husband to her.
Actually, Johnny, can I add something here? According to the way I've understood it and been told, David was Chayav Misa.
Okay, we're jumping several chapters there. When we get to those naughty bits, we can discuss that in detail, and we will discuss it in detail. But it's not for right now.
Yeah, but you can see his tendencies already now. You can see them.
So the point that I'm making here is the first parallel that we see that Anita's pointed out with the Yaakov story. Yaakov did not love Leah. Now, what did you ever see, by the way, just as a matter of interest, that Rachel or Leah loved Yaakov? Who can quote for me a pasuk that says that Leah or Yaakov Leah or Rachel loved Yaakov?
Well, she cried more, that's for sure. After she married him, Leah.
Yeah, that wasn't what I was asking. Where is the pasuk? David, can you find me a pasuk?
What's it to do with the mandrakes?
Okay, the mandrakes. So at the time of the mandrakes, Rachel brings mandrakes. Leah says, I'll have them. No, the other way around. Rachel says, I'll have those mandrakes. And Leah says, okay, you can have the mandrakes, but I'm having Yaakov tonight. And then Yaakov goes to Leah. Does it say there that they loved Leah or Rachel loved them? Okay, David Marks is our resident Chumash expert, and he's shaking his head, and he's quite right to shake his head. We are not told ever that Leah or Rachel loved Yaakov. There is only one other instance in the whole of Tanach where we are told that a woman loves a man, other than Michal loving David. Only one other place where a woman loves a man. Who can tell me where that is?
Sarah and Abraham.
No.
No. Okay.
Good guess, but not correct.
Okay.
Anyone? David, do you know?
According to Dat Mikra, that this is the only place in the whole of Tanakh where a woman loves a man. So here's the Chiddush Johnny.
Okay, it's not a Chiddush Johnny. You didn't listen to the question carefully enough.
Go on.
Where does it say in the Torah, and I've given you a clue there, it's in the Torah, so you should know it, David, that a woman loves a man? You're quite right. It's a bit of a trick question because this is the only time, I'll give the answer away now, but this is the only time in Tanakh where a woman loves a husband.
Adam and Eve?
Nope.
Nope.
Oh, yeah.
Go on, David.
No, it's not.
Okay. Vayehav Yitzchak et Esav kitzayid b'fiv, v'Rivka ohevet et Yaakov. Rivka loved Yaakov. A woman loving a man. Man happened to be her son. Okay, but it's the only other instance. So that was a trick question, and I'm very happy to have caught David out there. Not often that happens, so I'm taking that. But David is right, quoting the Dat Mikra. This is the only place in Tanakh where a woman loves a man that isn't her son, is Michal and David. It's very, very unusual. So, but what is clear and stark is that David does not reciprocate that love, as Anita said. Right, so that's our first parallel with the Yaakov story. Anyone else want to tell me a parallel with the Yaakov story?
Can't think.
Okay, so what?
I thought I read somewhere that they said that he did in fact marry both of them. And it's the second marriage of Meirav was an illicit one. I don't know. I read that somewhere, I think.
I haven't read that. Maybe that's the case. But we are, aren't we, in that sort of territory with the Yaakov story, because Yaakov wanted to marry Rachel, and he had earned the right to marry Rachel. And what happened? He was given Leah. He was not given Rachel. David had earned the right to marry Meirav. How had he earned the right to do so? He had killed Goliath. Okay, that was the deal, wasn't it? Whoever kills Goliath will be given the hand of the king's daughter in marriage. And then he reneged on that deal, didn't he? Shaul reneged on the deal. well, Lavan reneged on the deal with Yaakov. The deal was he got Rachel, and he didn't. He reneged on that deal. So there's another parallel. A father-in-law who reneged on a deal with his son-in-law. Furthermore, what was the price? What was the price, or what was the payment that Yaakov made for Rachel's hand in marriage in the end?
7 years of working.
No, that's what he offered. What did he end up? What did he end up doing?
14 years.
14 years.
Sorry, 14.
14 years. That's right. He offered 7 years. That was the deal, and then he had to do another 7 years. So he ended up doing. One sec, Paul. Just finish this little bit. He ended up doing 14 years, double what the price was, as it were. What did David do in order to get Michal? What was the price?
Doubled up the number of foreskins.
Correct. He doubled up the number of
foreskins. Yeah.
The price was 100 foreskins, and he doubled up the price. So there's another parallel. Yes, Paul.
You should have been there. You should have been there, Johnny.
Yeah, I could have given him more than 200.
Yeah, in the Steinsaltz on verse 21, it says, some maintain that Merab was also married to David and was given to Adriel in a sinful manner. And the reference is the Sanhedrin 19b.
Okay, 19b. We're not far off that in our share. We were up to 15. We might get to that in a few months. That's interesting. Okay, that she was given to her. It seems that Adriel, yes, some maintain that Merab was also married to David and was given to Adriel in a sinful manner. Okay, well, all right, we have to look at see where when we get to Sanhedrin 19b, we'll have a look at that. That's interesting. Okay, well, there's an even bigger parallel then, isn't it? Because he's now married to 2 sisters. That's a bit tricky, that though, isn't it? Because by the time David came along, there was a halacha that said you can't do that. You can't marry 2 sisters. And not only can you not marry 2 sisters, that is one of the Yaharog Va'al Yavos. You're not. That's one of the cardinal sins. So we'll have to go into that in a bit more detail, Paul. But thank you for pointing that out. Excellent.
I think it says in the Wikipedia that Adriel had children with both of them. Then they get married them both, but he had children with both. He called up Adriel.
Adriel had children with both who? Merab and Michal?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, 2 sisters. Well, one of them looked after the other's children. There was a whole discussion about it in Wikipedia, as I mentioned to you.
Okay, let's have a look and see. Let's
Adriel.
On our parallels. So they're both stories. The father-in-law reneges on a deal with his son-in-law. Lavan replaced Rachel with Leah. Let's just get it up for you on the screen. It's in chapter 29 of Bereshit, verse 18. There it is. Verse 18, please.
And Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will work for you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter.
Okay, and then what actually happened? We go to Bereshit 31, Pasuk 41, please.
This is 20 years that I have spent in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your animals, and you changed my wages 10 times.
So there we have it in writing. 14
That seems
years.
quite fair. Isn't that fair, Johnny? If he raises wages 10 times?
He didn't raise it. He changed it. Who says he raised it? May have reduced it.
Yeah, the tachlef. Yeah, you changed. Yeah.
What happened, of course, was that every time Yaakov became successful with the spotted sheep, he changed it and said, right, now it's the ringed sheep, and then he became successful with that. That's what that's referring to. But the reason I asked you to read that was the 14 years bit. So That was the double the amount. And of course, in our chapter here, in verse 27, he slew 200 men of the Philistines when he was only asked in verse 25 to bring 100. So there's the doubling of that. Now, that's the thematic parallel. There's also linguistic parallels, which I want to show you.
Johnny, before you leave that, where it breaks down a little is that Saul's motive was he was afraid of David, and well, Lavan wasn't afraid of Yaakov. He just wanted to get more work out of him.
Yeah, you're right. At the beginning, that's what he wanted, but at the end, he was certainly afraid of Yaakov because Yaakov was nicking all his stuff and his daughters. And in fact, that's another parallel that we have is that we haven't got to it yet in the Shaul story, but let's go to the Bereshit story, the Yaakov story in chapter 31 again, which I think is here, verses 14 to 17. Philip, please. There they are.
Okay. Yeah. And what's this? Sorry. And Rachel and Leah replied and said to him, "Do we still have a share or an inheritance in our father's house? Are we not considered by him as strangers? For he sold us and also consumed our money. But all the wealth that God separated from our father is ours and our children's. So now all that God said to you, do." So Jacob rose.
What there? Stop there. I'm just going to put you on mute, Philip, for the moment because there's a background noise. When you need to read again, you can unmute. So this here is Rachel and Rachel and Leah assisting the running away of Yaakov from Lavan. Yaakov says to his wives, "Come on, let's go." And they say, "Yeah, you're right." And they say to one another, "We're done here." And they collude with their husband against their father. Now, we haven't yet done it. It's in the next chapter of Shmuel Aleph. I'll just take it to you now. It's chapter 19. You will see in chapter 19, verse 11, Philip, just unmute and read verses 11 to 16 for us.
And Saul sent messengers to David's house to guard him and to put him to death in the morning. And Michal, his wife, told David, saying, "If you do not flee for your life tonight, tomorrow you will be put to death." And Michal let David down through the window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took the teraphim and put them into the bed, and she put a goat skin at its head and covered it with a garment. And Saul sent messengers to take David, and she said, "He is ill." And Saul sent the messengers to see David, saying, "Bring him up to me in my bed, that I may put him to death." And the messengers came to see David, saying, "Bring him up to me in the bed, that I may put him to death." And the messengers came, and behold, the teraphim was in the bed, and the goat skin was at its head.
Okay, so what happened here was that Michal assisted David in escaping from his father-in-law. Another parallel to what we've just seen with the Rachel story. And a final parallel that I want to show you is, again, we haven't come to it yet in the Shaul and David story, but in the Lavan story and Yaakov, you will know that eventually the Lavan catches up with Yaakov and they have a meeting. And what says the meeting? Verse 51, please, Philip, to the end.
And Laban said to Jacob, "Behold this pile, and behold this monument, which I have cast between me and you. This pile is a witness, and this monument is a witness, that I will not pass this pile to go to you, and that you shall not pass this pile and this monument to come to me to do harm. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor judge between us, the God of their father. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac.
Okay,
And
stop
Jacob
there.
Oh, sorry.
Stop there. Okay, so that was Lavan and Yaakov. They finally meet up. They make a pact. And look at verse 53. This is the important one. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nachor judge between us. Now I'm going to whiz you on a little bit onto Shmuel, Aleph chapter 24. And you will see there on verse 16, please, Philip. You're muted, Philip. You're muted. Philip, you're muted. 16.
And the Lord shall become a judge, and he shall judge between me and you, and he shall see and plead my cause, and exact justice to me from your hand.
Okay, stop there.
Yeah.
Stop there. So there you have, again, the same language. And the Lord shall become a judge. He shall judge between me and you. Exactly the same language that we saw with the Lavan and Yaakov story. One sec, Philip. So you can see here that thematically and linguistically, there are big parallels. There's another couple of linguistic things I want to show you, but first say, Philip, what do you have to say, Philip? You're muted. You're muted.
I read a little bit forward, and I saw in Pasuk 17, which is just past what I read, that Saul cried and called David his son. I mean, he was a psychopath, Saul.
Well, he wasn't a psychopath. He definitely had mental illness.
Paranoid, maybe. I don't know what.
He was definitely, he was definitely paranoid. He definitely had episodes of psychosis, and we've seen that, and we will see more of it. You're right.
Yeah.
Right. Say that again, David.
Bipolar.
Yeah, could well be
maybe.
bipolar.
Could be.
Right. So let's just go back and just to finish off the parallels here. So there's a funny expression which I asked you last week to take note of, and that we would come back to it. And I'm just going to find it for you now. Here it is. In our chapter 18. Are we still in 18? No, I went to 19. Let's go back to 18 on the screen. Verse 26, please, Philip.
And his servants told David these words, and the thing pleased David to become the king's son-in-law, and the days had not expired.
Stop there. So in verse 25, Shaul says, go and get me 100 foreskins. And verse 26, David is told this, and then we had this expression here. Velo malu hayamim. The days had not expired. And last week I asked you just to put those words to the side for a moment. What is that talking about? Anyone? Why
Saul's reign? Saul's reign? The reign of Saul?
It could be implied. That could be a subplot implication, but I don't think that's a simple chat. What does this mean? The days had not expired. Well, see if anybody can guess what Rashi says. Rashi gives us a very simple, as usual, simple pshat answer. David?
I haven't got Rashi in front of me at the moment, but I know what the parallel is that you're looking for.
Okay, well, hang on to the parallel then. I'll come to you for the parallel in a sec. Okay, well, Rashi says is quite simply that Shaul said, I want 100 foreskins, and you've got 2 weeks to do it in. In other words, he gave him, not necessarily 2 weeks, but he gave him a set time in which to fulfill this task of getting the 100 foreskins. A deadline, that's it. And what Rashi says is that lo malu hayamim, the days had not expired, meant that it was still within the deadline. And that David went and he managed to deliver his fee of 100 plus another 100 foreskins within the time scale that was set for him to do the task. That's a simple pshat. But there is a parallel here, which I think the Tanach is hinting at. And the reason I think the Tanach is hinting at it is because we are not told what Rashi says. Rashi is guessing, implying that there must have been a deadline, and that's why it says the deadline hadn't expired. But it doesn't say there was a deadline. There's nowhere earlier on when Shaul says, I want 100 foreskins, it doesn't say, and you've got 2 weeks to do it in. So this expression, velo malu hayamim, is sending us with a clue, with a linguistic clue, back to the Yaakov and Rachel and Lavan story. And David is going to show us where that is, David.
Well, the expression is ki milu yamai.
Okay, and do you know where that is?
Parshas Vayetze, Shlishi somewhere.
Okay, very good. Excellent. It is in Vayetze. It's in chapter 29, and it's verse 21. Philip, if you would read verses 18 to 21, please.
And Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will work for you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Lavan said, it is better that I give her to you than I should give her to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob worked for Rachel 7 years, but they appeared to him like a few days because of his love for her. And Jacob said to Lavan, give me my wife, for my days are completed, that I may come to her.
Okay, there you go. Ki malu yamai. Same expression, ki malu yamai. My days are completed. Here, it means I've done my 7 years. But in our chapter, it doesn't seem to mean anything. And here, where it says the days have not expired, velo malu hayamim, exactly the same expression, and it's another linguistic parallel. So we have found a pretty convincing parallel between the two stories. The next question that we need to address is why.
There's another very significant parallel.
Go on.
That we touched on and Philip read a few minutes ago.
Go on.
The Trafim.
Ah, of course, yes, the Trafim. Yes, the Trafim. Yes, I forgot about the Trafim. Yes, explain to us, David.
Okay, so in the next chapter that Philip just read before, Michal uses the Trafim, puts them in the bed to signify there was a man sleeping there. Sorry, there's another parallelism with another story with Jacob as well there with the goat hair.
Yes, I thought of that too as he was reading it. But let's stick with the Trafim at the moment and then we'll come to the other one. Okay,
so then what you read before when...
Here it is on the screen. Read it again for us, Philip, please. Verse 13. You're muted, Philip.
And Michal took the Teraphim and put them into the bed, and she put a goat skin at its head and covered it with a garment.
Okay, so the Trafim. What are the Trafim? Before David explains the parallel, what are these?
The house idols. The house idols.
Yeah, exactly. They are the house idols. That's a very good way of putting it. They are the idols that were used by this particular household. Every household had its own idols back in the day. They didn't have to go to shul to idol worship. They had their own. Everybody had their own. You could go to the idol shop and buy your own. We know about idol shops, don't we? From Abraham Avinu, the Midrash tells us that he was looking after his father's idol shop, etc. Everyone knows that story. So the Trafim are these house idols. Now, I don't know whether there is only one other place in the whole of Tanakh where the word Trafim is mentioned, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is only one other place in Tanakh. There's certainly only one place in the Torah where the word trafim is mentioned, and that is David,
where Rachel steals her father's trafim when she and Leah and Yaakov and the kids flee Lavan. Lavan demands to know where the trafim are, and Rachel is sitting on them, and she claims that she can't get up from the bed because it's the time of the month, and therefore she deceives her father, and he doesn't find the trafim.
Okay, beautifully put. It's on the screen for you now. It's chapter 31 of Bereshit, and
Hello?
hang on a second. There we go. Verse 30, Philip, onwards, please.
Okay. But now you have gone away for your
One second, Philip. This is Lavan speaking to Yaakov when he finally catches up with him. Verse 30.
But now you have gone away, for you longed for your father's house. But why have you stolen my gods? And Jacob replied, and he said to Laban, because I was afraid, because I said, lest you steal your daughters from me. The one with whom you find your God shall not live in the presence of our brothers. Recognize for yourself what is with me, and take it for yourself. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Lavan entered Jacob's tent and Leah's tent, and the tents of the two handmaids, but he did not find them. And he had come out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. But Rachel had taken the teraphim and placed them into the camel's saddle and sat upon them. So Laban felt about the entire tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, let my lord not be annoyed, for I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me. So he searched, but did not find the teraphim.
Okay, so there you are. David, have you found out whether teraphim is mentioned anywhere else in Tanach?
No, I haven't looked yet. I'll look later if you don't mind.
Okay, so there you are. There's a very powerful connection again between the two stories, and of course the one that David was mentioning before that I also thought of as Philip was reading it. It's in over here in the chapter 19 that we're going to read shortly. What did Michal do with the teraphim? Verse 13 on the screen, Philip.
And Michal took the teraphim and put them into the bed, and she put a goat skin at its head and covered it with a garment. Same thing, more or less.
What does that remind you of?
Same thing, more or less, of what Rachel did.
Well, she hid the teraphim, but here the parallel that I'm thinking of, and I'm sure this is a parallel that David was thinking of, is the goat skin. Yaakov had goat skin put on himself, did he not? And what was all that about? When he stole the bracha of Esav, he had goat skin put on him in order to fool Yaakov that he was something that he wasn't. These teraphim have goat skin put on them to fool the messengers that they are in fact David HaMelech, and they weren't. They were teraphim. So again, another parallel. So we've got loads of parallels. David, have you got any more?
Well, I've got a parallel with another story as well, which may or may not be significant, but the teraphim is highly problematical. You know, what are both Rachel and Michal doing with idols? Probably more so Michal, because we're talking about after Matan Torah, but even with Rachel. So what are the teraphim? What's the significance of the teraphim? We probably aware what Philip has just read, where Jacob makes this oath that whoever has taken the teraphim will surely die. And that's one of the reasons given for Rachel dying in childbirth, that oath that Yaakov should never have made. but still asking the same question: what are the Trafim? What's the significance of the Trafim? And then it brings out another parallel between the Jacob story and the Shaul and Michal story.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll come to you in a sec, Philip. So in terms of these Trafim, it is a big problem, of course. And what was Rachel doing to Trafim? We understood why Lavan had Trafim. Why did she have to nick them?
Okay, you know? So I'll give you two ideas, which are both very significant with the parallels of the two stories. Number one, both Rachel and we'll see later on Michal have fertility issues. And one of the explanations of the Trafim, it was a fertility drug. Another interpretation,
a fertility god,
yeah. Another interpretation which fits in with both stories. Again, something that Philip read a few minutes ago. Have a look back in Parashat Vayetze, chapter 31, verse 14.
There it is on the screen for you. Philip, you're going to read that for us, verse 14.
And Rachel and Leah replied and said to him, "Do we still have a share or an inheritance in our father's house?
Okay.
Are we not okay.
Okay. One of the explanations here is the Trafim were like a family heirloom, and whoever had the Trafim had a share in that person's household. And the same thing applies as to why Michal had the Trafim. It was a sign of her inheritance from her father, her family role in the extended family. Okay.
That's interesting. I didn't know about that one. Let's just talk about these Trafim for a second. Yes, Philip, unmute.
In reply to David, I think that the way that Rachel and Michal handled the Trafim, I mean, Rachel sat on them and Michal just covered them with a goat skin. I don't think that they had much respect for the Trafim. Even though they were infertile, I don't think that they considered that the Trafim would help them become pregnant.
Okay, that's interesting. Let's just take that. Let's just take both of those points together. The big question, and this is a question that David is raising, is what is, heroines like Rachel Imenu, what's she doing with these gods? Her father had these Trafim, these gods. What did she need to nick them for? She's leave them behind. Well, one of the explanations, which I'm not buying for 1 second, is that she wanted to take them in order to rid Lavan of them, so that he would not be able to serve Avodah Zorah. Not buying that personally. I think that's a whitewash, but that is definitely one of the.
That's Rashi.
Yeah, well, me and Rashi are not always in agreement with one another, as you probably noticed. So, but the problem is that the thing is, Rachel took these Trafim, Michal had Trafim. Now, what this demonstrates to us, it's more of a problem with Rachel than it is with Michal, because with Michal we've got plenty precedent, and we saw it all the way through Sefer Shoftim. And remember, Sefer Shoftim is immediately before this particular period. This is a transition, isn't it, really? That Bnei Israel hedged their bets all the time. They served Hashem, but they also had the local gods, and that's what got them into trouble. They never really abandoned Hashem completely. They just didn't serve him exclusively. And that was the big problem, because, of course, the beginning of the Ten Commandments tells us, you shall have no other gods apart from me. God is, the only one. Bnei Israel found that particular commandment, very, very difficult. And we see that it was very difficult for them to disengage from the local gods. And so with Michal, you can understand it because, you know, she was in that society. We can say the same about Rachel, but of course, Rachel Imenu, we expect somehow or other to be on a higher madrega than that. But it's definitely problematic. There's no question. David is right. It's problematic. The Trafim indicate that there was a connection between many of our ancestors and the local gods. The fertility god, by the way, that David is referring to, is probably Astarte, Astarte, who was the recognized fertility god of the Canaanite people. Rachel was living in Canaan at the time. It was probably Astarte. What they used to do, if you look up how they did with this Astarte, everybody would have, who wanted fertility, would have their own little Astarte a model, you know, a bit like Action Man. We all had our own Action Man, or Barbie dolls if you were girls. And there was the main Astarte was in the temple there, the temple of Astarte. You'd have to go and do all sorts of stuff there in the temple, but you would also serve your own Astarte in your own home. And these Trafim, if they were fertility gods, were probably the Canaanite god of fertility of Astarte. Okay, let's spend the last few minutes. We've definitely, I think, established our connection. Why? Why is Tanach telling us of these connections? What is the reason for this parallel that's coming up that we've clearly seen? And I think there are two specific issues which we can pull out of this parallel. Anybody want to offer anything before I tell you what I think? What's Tanach getting at here to give us such strong parallels to these two stories? Let's deal with the fathers-in-law first of all. Lavan is, let's say, one of our anti-heroes. What do we read in the Haggadah coming up in a few weeks? Lavan was worse than Pharaoh. Pharaoh only wanted to kill the male children. Lavan wanted to kill them all, wanted to get rid of them all. Lavan, Arami, Oved, Avi. Okay, the Aramite, Aramaean, that means Lavan, wanted to destroy Yaakov. Lavan is not given any positive features whatsoever. Okay, even when he does something good, we're told that he had underlying ulterior motives. So, for example, when Eliezer turns up looking for a wife for Yitzchak, and Lavan rushes out to give him hospitality, all of the Mefarshim say that this was not altruism. He saw the gold and the bracelets and the nose rings and stuff that Eliezer had given to Rivka, and he fancied a bit of the action himself and thought, this guy must be wealthy, let's bring him in. He was the initial and the archetypal opportunist. He's given no credit for anything. We're told he was a swindler. He was just a rotten so-and-so all the way through. If there's a parallel there, this does not reflect well on Shaul. Now, Shaul is not a person who is completely bad. We know that because, well, he was chosen by God for a start to be the king. So he must have had at least potential to be a good fellow. We call our children after Shaul. Not sure I would call a child of mine after Shaul, having studied his life in Tanach in detail now. I think I said that about Shimshon as well. But I suppose, to be honest, if you look at all our heroes, there's quite a few of them that you might not want to think about. But Shaul, one of the correspondence here is that it's not flattering at all to Shaul to be compared to Lavan. And although David himself comes a cropper in terms of his behavior in later chapters, at this point at least, David is the hero of the story. And in all good stories, in all good biblical stories and fables, there's a goodie and a baddie. And the contrast here at this point is between Shaul, who has disobeyed God by not doing what he was told with Agag. He has refused to accept his fate with alacrity. We know his fate has been declared by Shmuel as the word of God, that God has torn away the kingdom from Shaul with the episode with tearing the coat of Shmuel. Shmuel says very clearly to him, it's over, Shaul. Shaul goes to desperate means to try and avoid the fate that Shmuel has told him. And that demonstrates one thing very clearly, and that is lack of faith on the part of Shaul, lack of faith in God, which is a pretty biggie, really. Lavan, of course, had no faith in God, and this is an important feature. Why do I say that Lavan had no faith in God? Not because of the Traphim, because Rachel had Traphim, Michal had Traphim. Why? I say that because Lavan's entire approach to life was to try and get stuff that he was not entitled to swindle Yaakov out of stuff that was not meant for him. Now, a fundamental of faith in Hashem is that we get what Hashem says we should get and what we deserve. Paul's got a sour face on there. He doesn't like it. Let me finish and then we can talk to Paul about why he doesn't like it. A fundamental thing that we say when we accept God as our king on Rosh Hashanah is that the portion that every person, every nation gets is detailed on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah yikatevon, uvayom tom kippur yechatemun. Mi yashir u'mi ani. Who will be rich and who will be poor, etc., etc. It's a fundamental of our faith in God that we accept what God has in store for us. Theft and cheating in those kind of things is a fundamental expression of lack of faith in God, which is why it is so difficult to see so-called religious Jews who do swindles and fraud, and I am talking about nobody in particular and everybody in general. And of course, the more obviously so-called religious they are or look, the worse the Chilul Hashem is, because that is a clear demonstration that it's lip service that we are paying to this idea that we have faith in God and that God will give us our due recompense. And that's a fundamental of the Jewish religion, is that we have faith in God. Sure, we have to do our bit, but that doesn't mean doing our bit in a fraudulent manner. So I think that the idea here of comparing Shaul to Lavan is an issue of a basic fundamental lack of faith on the part of Shaul. That's how I see this comparison. Paul, now you have to explain your sour face.
Can't help my sour face. Well, I mean, you said that Hashem decides what we're going to have, so it doesn't say how we're going to have it. So I don't really see that as fundamental, as you put it. But also, you started off by showing one of the parallels was the oath that Lavan and Leah made and the treaty that they made, and he calls God into that. So he obviously does believe in that. He does believe in Hashem. He may have weaknesses and evil inclinations, but that doesn't mean to say he doesn't believe in God. Sorry.
Okay, I'll accept that. I'll accept that. It's not all or nothing. It is a failure on his part in his level of faith. Then I will accept that in parts, at least, he's demonstrating faith in God. But at this particular juncture in his life, he's demonstrating a clear failure to accept the prophecy of Shmuel, which is, it's over for you and David's going to take over, or at least somebody is going to take over, and it seems clear that it's David. He wants to try and get rid of it. Yes, David Marks, you're waving your pen. That usually means you want to say something.
Yeah, I partially agree with Paul here, that if you look at the basic written Torah on Lavan, there's nothing much there to criticize him for. It's Torah Sheba'al Peh that go to town on Lavan and create this terrible characterization of him. But I think the parallel that's being drawn with Shaul and Lavan is that both gentlemen failed to meet their commitments.
Right. Yes, we said that earlier on, didn't we? That they both reneged on their commitments, on their deals. That's correct. Okay, so the parallel is unflattering for Shaul. It's also unflattering for David, because we said before, Anita started this shiur off with her insight that one of the parallels was that Yaakov did not love Leah, but whom did he love? Whom did Yaakov love?
Rachel.
Rachel. And we are told many times that Yaakov loved Rachel. Philip's read a couple of them out already. I'm not going to go over them because we've run out of time. But Yaakov loves Rachel. David does not love neither Michal nor Merav. So it's unflattering of David when what we see here, and this is if you like, this is the starting point of the relationship between David and Michal, which is entirely one way. There is, as we said earlier on, unrequited love on the part of Michal for David. David does not behave nicely towards Michal in the next chapter and beyond, and this is setting the storm. So this comparison of these two stories is a reflection, which is not a flattering reflection of either Shaul or David. And it sets the scene for the next chapter, chapter 19, which will start next week, which is the continuing pursuit of David by Shaul. We've already had a little insight into it, because I took you to it a couple of weeks ago, where you'll see that Shaul has another go with his spear at David, misses again. And we see how he threatens to have David put to death, and Michal saves his life. The reward for that from David is not very apparent, as we will see. So we'll leave it there. Any comments on the chapter 18? We are going to leave chapter 18 behind and go on to chapter 19 at the beginning of next week. Any comments at today's shiur? David?
Yeah, on the last point you made, we did discuss last week or the week before, there must have been last week, the political alliance, which was in both David and Saul's mind, marrying one of Saul's daughters. So I think that's relevant. We know many political alliances in non-Jewish history. It was nothing to do with love between two parties. It was purely an alliance between one country and another. Terafim,
House of Windsor.
Exactly. Terafim doesn't occur anywhere else in the Torah, but of course there's a very familiar story that we learnt a year or so ago where it occurs frequently in Pesel
Micha.
Yeah. And there are other places in Tanakh as well where the word's used.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. But it's only the one place in Torah. Great. Okay. Well, any other comments? Great. Anything else?
Do we know? Sorry, I just want to ask when she hid the idols, Rachel, she was sitting on them. She was already on her way escaping. Did she take them into Yaakov's home? I mean, this is Yaakov Avinu we're talking about. So to take never mind about Rachel, Imanu, it's Yaakov Avinu as well.
Never got there.
He, of course, never knew about it, which is why he made that rash statement that David referred to earlier, where he says to Lavan, well, I've taken nothing from you. Whoever I find has taken anything from you, these gods, they shall be put to death. Well, he didn't know that Rachel had taken them. So we can assume he certainly didn't know about it. And therefore, we can assume that either he never found out about it and Rachel never told him, or if he did find out about it, he would have jolly well got rid of them and given her a proper Misha Beirach for it.
Yeah.
And don't forget, he never got to the home because she died en route. Don't forget. Yeah,
but I mean, they lived. They obviously had separate tents. But I think what Anita was asking was, did Rachel sort of involve Yaakov? Did she bring it into Yaakov's tent, as it were? If it was a fertility god, maybe that was part of the process. I don't know, but it's clear from the psukim that Yaakov did not know about it and would not have sanctioned it. Okay. All right, everyone. Shavua Tov. We will continue tomorrow night. We'll restart the Tefillah Shir at 8 o'clock tomorrow night for those of you who are interested. Until then, Shavua Tov. Have a good day.
Shavua Tov.
Thank you. Thanks, Yannick.